Welcome everybody. Last week, I planted bulbs in my backyard while I was thinking about this talk. And after I placed those onion-like lumps into several holes, I covered them with dirt and soaked the earth with water. And as I worked, I was thinking about 2 years ago when I gave the keynote address at the international, this is weird here, what's going on. I think I'm going to try to figure out how to do that. Okay. And I gave a keynote address to the International Cannabis Business Conference in Barcelona. And I was asked to present what the EU can learn from the evolution, challenges, and successes in North American cannabis. Last week, less than 2 years after I gave that talk, Spain published their first draft of the medicinal cannabis rules, and our whole industry rejoiced. We celebrate the fact that Spain planted the seeds of an industry, just like I planted those bulbs last week. We celebrated that Spain will reap, in the future, increased wellness and relief for its citizens, relief from seizures, pain, insomnia, cancer, Parkinson's, the list goes on. We know opiate prescriptions, this is a global average, will drop 11%, and opiate-related overdose deaths will decrease by 28%. And the number of solved, I feel like the criminal justice speaker before me stole a little bit of my thunder, but I realize I'm touching on a lot of what the speakers have said all day today. The average of countries that have legalized cannabis, 20% of the non-solved violent crimes become solved. Why? Because we can reallocate resources. We can actually take a cop, and he talked about that. They don't have to go look at people who have joints. They can go look at people who are raping people or hurting people. So you get this reallocation of resources. Our industry celebrates the people of Spain, like the Germans, the Canadians, the Americans, and the citizens of over 50 countries around the world that finally have legal access to this undeniably beneficial plant. And what happens after legalization is society starts to heal. The end of cannabis prohibition is the beginning of community healing. Now, I'll go into that a little bit more, what I mean by that. So I was asked to give that keynote, and thank you to Tota for inviting me here to do it again in Iceland, because I've spent the last decade watching this story play out over and over again as an operator and a leader in the global cannabis and hemp industries. So my cannabis journey began about 15 years ago when I became a cannabis landlord. So what I did before I got into cannabis, I was a real estate investor and a landlord. I owned a building in Montana, and a cannabis grower came to me. There had just been a bunch of raids in Montana. Some people had been put in prison. It was pretty dicey. And what he didn't know is that my dad had been growing cannabis for 57 years on the cattle ranch that I grew up on in Montana. And he also didn't know that my first cousin on my mom's side is DJ Muggs from Cypress Hill, famous rap band that raps about getting high in cannabis and things like that. And so I'm cannabis friendly, but I was not a user. I was a basketball player. I played college basketball. I played on the USA team. And so I wasn't really familiar with it, but what I was okay with is renting my building to him. So I became a cannabis landlord. A couple years later, DJ Muggs and I, my cousin, we bought a cannabis farm in Northern California, in Sonoma County. During that time, we worked on a collaboration with Cypress Hill, his band, and the award-winning multi-state edibles company, Bhang. That was in 2015. I was hired by Bhang that year to run the collab. 7 years later, I stepped down after having served the last 3 with Bhang as their president and CEO. When I left, Bhang was a public company that was being traded on the Canadian Securities Exchange. We had distribution of our lots of products on 3,000 shelves in 11 countries, 7 US states, And our chocolate was and continues to be the #1 cannabis-infused chocolate brand in Canada. So fast forward to today, I'm the founder and president of the New Holland Group, which is a global cannabis consultancy that helps companies and brands and CEOs scale their global cannabis businesses by learning how to parallel process, working in prohibition, but get ready for legalization. We're talking about in the USA next year that probably we're going to reschedule cannabis from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. We're talking about maybe having safe banking, because what a lot of people don't realize is in the US, you can't cross state lines with products. That means I had to have 50 different chocolate manufacturing facilities because I couldn't have one and then just distribute the product everywhere. Everybody that's operating in cannabis does it with 2 hands tied behind their back. So what I do is help companies who want to scale learn how to do that dance and how to be ready for legalization, but operate in prohibition and do it legally, because the key here is that people need to be safe and people need to know that your products are going to help them be efficacious, be consistent. That's what I got pretty good at. I always say my job at Bhang was kissing frogs. So I would fly to I want to open Missouri, I got to fly to Missouri and meet everybody doing cannabis in Missouri. Now I got to fly to Michigan and meet everybody in Michigan. So I have, over the last 10 years, met pretty much every operator in the cannabis industry in the United States and globally. My children are dual citizens of German, und ich spreche Deutsch. And I spent a lot of time in Germany, so it was easy for me to get Bhang products into the European market. So figuratively, for the past decade, I've been planting the seeds of this industry all over the world. So I'm telling you that I've had a front row to what happens when countries legalize medicinal cannabis. Typically, it starts with politicians going after tax revenue. And the cool thing about cannabis tax revenue is it actually is taking a different bucket of money. Normally, it's you have the conservatives and you have the liberals want schools and the conservatives want an army. So we take money from the army, we give it to the schools, then we take money from the schools, we give it to the army. And what happens with cannabis legalization is we actually pull the money out of the illicit market and where it needs to be. And it needs to be in the government's hands to improve your roads and improve your schools. And so that's what happens when you legalize cannabis, is that you get this tax revenue. And it's a boon, but that's usually what the politicians are after. And they kind of hold their nose and they're full of fear. Am I going to get reelected? Am I going to piss people off? But they go ahead and vote for cannabis. And then here's what they predictably do. They overtax it and they overregulate it. So they overtax it because they want that tax revenue. And then when they overregulate it, and they're like, oh God, we got to be careful for the children. Well, what that does, ironically, is it emboldens the illicit market. Because and another thing we talked about, because what happens, imagine this, you're Joe Blow drug dealer on the street, and you've got to run from the cops, you got to be aware what's going on, and now all of a sudden, cannabis has been legalized. Organized crime says we've got a window. We can now put that guy on the corner with impunity. In Germany right now, when they decriminalized, you went from not being allowed to possess to being allowed to have 25 grams. That basically means if you got caught and had 25 joints in your pocket, you're good. So now the organized crime people are like, yay, get 25 joints, and when you sell them to those tourists, go get 25 more, because every time you get busted, you're not breaking the law. So the irony is, what they need to do is go get that guy off the street and bring him into the legal market, but that's not how it works. And so probably when you guys legalize in Iceland, you're going to start with decriminalization, and you will have a burgeoning illicit market. But what that does that's positive is cannabis becomes ubiquitous. It's everywhere, because what you guys need to realize is it's ubiquitous anyway. Your husband gets diagnosed and you say people come out of the woodwork to help you. That was my dad. My dad was growing cannabis for people that had cancer, and he would give RSO to people that had cancer. I always say some people's dads work on old cars. My dad had a cannabis extraction lab. I'll show you pictures at the event. It's funny. I didn't think it was funny when I was a kid. I thought my dad was the biggest loser because I was an athlete and I didn't buy into the war on drugs. And they always say the older you get, the smarter your parents get. And what I realize is he had it right all along. And now I don't think he's the big loser. I think his patience with me was great. And I hit the jackpot with my parents. So anyway, the irony is when the government legalizes cannabis, it's going to accelerate that illicit market for a period of time. But what I want you to keep in mind is you can't buy beer in a middle school bathroom. I was a middle school teacher for a long time. I can tell you, you can buy every illicit drug in a middle school bathroom, but you can't buy beer there. Can't buy cigarettes there. So the minute we get legalized, you got to let the dust settle a little bit. When the dust settles and the government gets control and you get taxation and you get safe products and people can go to stores, everything gets the way it's supposed to be. So currently, Iceland has laws designed to protect you from the dangers of cannabis as a drug, despite the fact that, in the words of Bill Murray, the comedian, we know the only thing dangerous about cannabis is possessing it. Lawmakers have made substances like opiates, alcohol, and tobacco legal, and people die from those every day. But they're huge industries, pharma, alcohol, and tobacco, and they stand to lose a lot of money when cannabis is legalized. That's part of why we're all in this stigma, because they have pumped a lot of money into making sure that we didn't get where we are right now. And now what you see is British American Tobacco just invested $150 million in Organogram in Canada. They're hedging their losses. Big Alcohol put $5 billion Constellation Brands into Canopy Growth Corp, a public company in Canada. They know this is coming, and they know in every market where cannabis is legalized, the use of alcohol goes down, drunk driving goes down. They're losing market share. So they're joining us, but they're waiting. They're not going to jump in with both feet, but they'll put strategic money where they can have access to data. So you reap what you sow, right? And Iceland's a country that gives its adults access to freely buy and use alcohol and cigarettes, but you're protected from cannabis. You guys see the irony there? I'm excited to tell you what Iceland can reap with legalization. But before we get there, I want you to remember cannabis is already an industry in your country. It's being grown, it's being sold, and it's being consumed here. And the illicit market and the players in it are going to be a big factor in what it looks like once you legalize. If they're invited and welcome to participate, your industry will immediately be better and it will benefit. They forgot more about growing cannabis than the suits will know when they jump into this market. They know who all the plugs are. They know where all the holes are. If people could actually trust the people from the illicit market, it just works a lot better. So here's the secret sauce of legalization. The basis of effective legalization and the conversation around legalization have to shift from tax revenue to harm reduction. Legalizing cannabis is a human rights issue. And I want that to sink in. Somebody said that here today. It is a human rights issue. Tax revenues and safety are important, don't get me wrong. But the harm reduction side of cannabis legalization is a much larger bucket of money with a more positive ripple effect. Cannabis legalization designed around harm reduction is an economic driver on steroids. Besides job creation, new tax revenue, violent crime reduction, and all the favorable statistics like the decrease in drunk driving and opiate and fentanyl deaths and addiction rates, the decision to legalize becomes more compelling when harm reduction and improved well-being of citizens are also taken into account. And isn't Iceland one of those countries that in 2017 changed your measure of effectiveness from GDP to the wellness quotient? Aren't you one of those sin countries, Scotland, Iceland, and New Zealand? You measure the effectiveness of your budget on how much access to wellness your citizens have. It makes sense for you to add this as one of your wellness measurements. So the money and attention that is spent policing cannabis crimes, feeding and housing cannabis prisoners, and the tax revenue that you lose by having those productive citizens removed from society, all that is a bigger bucket of money than just the tax on the product. Legalizing cannabis improves the health and well-being of your people. And good legalization measures are the type of measures that bring conservatives and liberals together, because you have to have the cultural liberalism of progressives and the deregulatory zeal and economic sensibilities of fiscal conservatives both in order for that legislation to be good. And it makes very little sense to usher in a more permissive and tolerant attitude toward cannabis, decriminalize possession, and then create a bunch of rules that suffocate the industry and make it impossible for them to compete. So think about the dude on the corner isn't lab testing and he's not paying taxes. So you create a legal industry, you got to lab test, you got to pay taxes because you want to provide safe products to your citizens and you want to benefit from the tax revenue. But that's another reason why that illicit seller is going to do better than you are initially, because it becomes cost prohibitive to sell clean cannabis. Now there are people who are they don't care what it costs and they'll go buy it, and that market will get bigger and bigger. But if you can convince your lawmakers to get that illicit market included, it works better. And people can come talk to me about that, because I sat on Governor Cuomo in New York's roundtable. I sit on the National Cannabis Roundtable. I'm out in the world of policy making. So last week, while I was planting my bulbs and thinking about how I could synthesize the last 10 years of what I've done into a 30-minute talk, it hit me. Just as I planted those bulbs, hoping, well, actually knowing that 6 or 7 months later, I'm going to have tulips. When Iceland plants the seeds of hemp and cannabis legalization like Spain did last week, we know what those metaphorical flowers are going to look like. Let's see if this works. So you're going to get economic benefits. We talked about it, the tax revenue. The last sentence is important here. You can shear a sheep over and over, but you can only skin them once. So when your taxes are too high, the sheep dies. Job creation. A legal cannabis industry, think about all these jobs that you're going to have now. Farming, manufacturing, retail, and the ancillary services like legal, accounting, security, transportation, marketing, banking. It's really an industry. It's pretty cool. But you guys have some special things that are going to make your industry, I think, super compelling. And I think if you legalize, there's a huge opportunity to build wealth. Number one, you've got a massive tourist market. 1.7 million tourists came here last year. You only have 400,000 people. I mean, that's where your money's coming from. Why not peel a few extra dollars every time a tourist comes? Sell them a few joints. They're going to do better looking at your beauty when they're high than they are when they're drunk, right? They're going to eat more food. All the things you want and all the things you don't want go away. Energy, you guys have a super cheap energy source here, right? This geothermal energy. The best cannabis is grown indoors. Now, that's a statement that's wrong on many levels, but what I'll tell you is the prettiest buds that have the highest THC count, and yes, high THC is what sells. People will build a tolerance, especially someone who's fighting cancer. They need stronger cannabis. That's grown indoors because you can control the environment. But that's cost prohibitive because of energy. So let's put those two things together. You have the energy. You can grow really great buds indoor. And guess what? You can provide your own market. But Europe cannot keep up with demand because Germany legalized month over month. The demand is getting so strong, and the industry here could start feeding some of that European mainland demand as well. Industry leaders. Oh, I already did that. Okay. Public opinion. I just went online and looked at all your newspapers and the articles that I could find, and here's what I basically synthesized. In 2010, the majority of Icelanders were not about it. They were very anti-cannabis. 2016, that number shifted and now slightly more Icelanders wanted cannabis, but there was still quite a big anti-cannabis sentiment. Last year, 60% of Icelanders were in favor of decriminalizing. The conversation's changing, and now it's popular. People get it. They want it. They don't want to smoke out or drink alcohol. All of you that have, I'm 55, just like you are. All of you that have kids that are my kids' age, 25-ish, my kids aren't drinking alcohol. They consider it poison. This is what's coming. So, improve public health, safer products. You control who uses it. Can't buy beer in a middle school bathroom. Opioid abuse reduction. 11% reduction in opioid prescriptions, 28% reduction. And that's, those statistics were provided by my friend, Bo Whitney of Whitney Economics. He provides all the data to the US government, many governments around the world. You can go to whitneyeconomics.com and download all of his reports. Medical benefits. According to Bo, Iceland would save $165 million per year on healthcare spending because these ailments right here, and there's many more, have terrible side effects from the pharmacopoeia that has been developed to treat it. Cannabis is better for these ailments than the drugs that are being provided. They don't have side effects. And so a lot of the money that you guys are spending on your cancer patients has to do with the harm that chemotherapy does, and then cannabis helps you have your appetite back, stop seizures. People with Parkinson's do better. Environmental benefits. I'm going fast because I know everyone's tired, and also if you guys have questions. Both hemp and cannabis, it's the same plant, and thank you for saying that, the woman that wrote that book. A variant of the cannabis plant is hemp, and it requires, this is a statistic I know, a cotton t-shirt takes 100 gallons of water to make. A hemp t-shirt takes 1 gallon of water to make. Hemp grows fast. It's the second fastest growing plant to bamboo with little water, fewer pesticides, and it actually sucks the toxins out of the air, the water, and the earth. It's a natural carbon sink. It's a very potent tool in the fight against climate change. And after looking at what's going on in Florida, we need this. We need to get our show on the road. And this is my last paragraph. Legalizing cannabis is not only a smart economic decision, but also increases wellness by reducing harm. Iceland will create tax revenue to invest in schools, healthcare, and infrastructure, create jobs, boost local economies, and at the same time, regulating cannabis cuts down on low-level arrests, easing the burden on your justice system, and allowing for the reallocation of those resources. I wrote this paragraph so somebody can take it and go deliver it right to your legislators. This is a policy the public overwhelmingly supports. Legalization ensures safer products, an opportunity to plug more outside revenue from tourists into your economy, an enormous opportunity to monetize your cheap energy. By leading on this issue, Iceland can show other countries how to positively embrace cannabis to enhance your economy and support the health and wellness of your people. And it falls very neatly in line with the UN Sustainable Goals and with the wellness adoption that Iceland is already part of. That's what will happen when you legalize cannabis. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jamie. I have to say it's really sad that we're missing members of parliament and policymakers here. One person, nice to see you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure.
Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I'm hoping that we have some questions for Jamie.
Go for it.
Anybody? Yeah. Sikert med microphone. 1 second.
I have one in the meantime.
Okay.
What's the silliest objection you've gotten from a politician about why legalization takes?
Again, this is my opinion, but it's the what about the children? That's usually their excuse. What about the children? We can't legalize cannabis. Nobody, hear me, I'll repeat it, fact check me. Nobody has ever died from using cannabis. It's like vitamin C. If once you're high, you're not going to die. People will use it. I know this from Bhang chocolate, because we had chocolate bars that were 240 milligrams, and people would eat the entire chocolate bar and not read the instructions. And then they would end up in the emergency room with a panic attack. But all you got to do is just wait. It goes away. Take some CBD, take a hot shower, eat some fatty food. It's not going to kill you. Nobody's ever OD'd on cannabis. So the whole thing about, oh, the children, it's like you've got bottles of alcohol, you've got tobacco, you've got opiates, you've got a medicine cabinet, you've got everything. And Iceland, you've got, poison that you're legally selling, but you want to protect the children. Got it. I think that's silly. Okay, so what's your question?
Thank you for this. This has been a really interesting day, and I think this is amazing that Hempfeel actually put this together and did this, because there have been some really important information that's come forth. And I just wanted to say, because you showed on your slide that there was 60% support now for decriminalization. But
that was for all drugs, by the way, not
yes,
just cannabis. Yes.
Exactly, for decriminalization of all drugs. But there's also been a poll recently that shows there's actually around 60% support for regulating cannabis.
Yay!
Also. So there's been a huge turn with public support for this, which I think is amazing. So my question to you, as a legislator, what is the most important thing to kind of look at or look towards or when thinking about legislating this or for legalizing or regulating cannabis? Because, I mean, the US has gone very much profit-driven model in the way that, in the way that they've kind of, legislated. Whereas Canada have gone a completely different way, and they've had more kind of harm reduction and health as kind of at the forefront of their legislation model. So, I mean, just seeing what are the effects of these two different ways, and what would be your advice to me as a legislator legislating this? Like, where should my focus be?
Well, I think you already have the, quote, sin industries regulated, right? You have tobacco rules around who can sell, how can sell, alcohol rules, who can sell, who can buy, who can manufacture, how does that all work? You don't need to reinvent the wheel. The way I look at it is, if you can go buy a bottle of beer in the corner store, you should be able to go buy a joint as well. And I know that that's going to be a hard leap for people to make, but the reality is, when you give that beer seller, whatever you charge him for the right to sell that beer, you can charge him something similar for the right to sell that joint. And where you need to control cannabis is in the manufacturing side of things and in the lab testing side of things, because when you've got clean, safe supply of product, that's where I would limit the licenses. I would have the big dollars come in to the manufacturing side of things. I would rather have Nabisco making chocolate bars at scale, knowing how to keep a food factory safe, than having, grandma baking brownies in her kitchen and her cat's up licking the batter. And that's what ends up happening in these sort of mom and pop shop scenarios, where if you lower the barrier of entry to selling cannabis as a government, you have all the data. You know how much demand is out there. You can always dial it back. So a great example is Oklahoma. The first licenses were $5. A license to produce and sell cannabis was $5. It was a free-for-all. It was an explosion. To this day, there are more cannabis stores than all coffee shops combined. There's more dispensaries than Starbucks in Oklahoma. But Oklahoma knows exactly how much cannabis, who's selling it, where it's going. And to your point, the illicit market in Oklahoma, Chinese run. They all came in and got licenses. There's Chinese organized crime everywhere. They haven't figured out how to do that. But none of that pot is going into Oklahoma. It's all probably going back to Asia, or who knows where it's going. But they can grow it. But that's what I would do, is I would lower the barrier to entry for selling cannabis. And that also kills the guy on the corner, right? We don't kill him, but we can invite him in, and we can say, $5, here's your license. That's where your tax revenue comes from. Let everybody sell it who wants to sell it, because the free market will speak, and the ones who run a good business will survive, and the ones who don't will eventually go down the road. That's how I would manage it. Put that bottleneck at manufacturing.
Any more questions? Yeah,
Back there. Yeah.
you're getting a microphone there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, you first then.
Okay. I'm pretty sure that health professionals are going to be, pretty much against this, legalizing, especially you said, what about the children? Now, I'm a father of 4, and at least until now, I've been under the impression that if you use cannabis before the age of maybe, say, 25, while your brain isn't fully developed, you're going to be dumb as a rock. That's basically what they've been telling us,
You're exactly right.
And Professor Magnus, who sat next to me on the panel before, he said, at least if I understood him correctly, that this was a misinformation. So is it bullshit, or is it,
No, it's actually proven that cannabis use, now we're not talking about one-time using, we're talking about cannabis use is not good for a developing brain. What I'm saying when I answered his question about the silliness of protect the children, I'm not suggesting that children should be using cannabis. Children aren't using alcohol, and alcohol is bad for the developing brain as well. But we know how to keep our alcohol out of our children's hands theoretically. So what I'm saying is using that as an excuse to not have the rules in a place where you have alcohol freely sold and tobacco freely sold is disingenuous. Parents can keep the product away from their children, and should. And yeah, the studies have shown that your brain stops developing, or it's just like when kids walk. Some kids walk at 10 months, some kids walk at 2 years old. Your brain stops developing. And I was a middle school teacher. I have a degree in education, did a lot of work in brain research of adolescence. Middle school was my specialty, and I know everyone thinks I'm weird because I liked the little adolescent teenagers going through puberty. They were my favorite. But you do get them back. They're monsters for a while, but they're great later. So I would just say, keep the cannabis out of people's hands. But when I heard you tell your story, having a dad that made RSO oil and watching people do so much better on the RSO, it makes me mad that you had to go through that. This is a plant. You should have had access to it. But they're going to let you have beer or wine or vodka, and it's poison.
And boxes of OxyContin.
And boxes of OxyContin, and they're going to shove it down your throat, and you get addicted. You can't poop, and all the things, right? I don't know. One more. We had a question back there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, if you could please just pass it down. Thank you. Tack, Tota.
I'll speak up.
Okay.
Jamie, I know we spoke earlier as well, but I think it ties into the gentleman's... Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. It ties also into the gentleman's question that just raised about his story, which is a statement it's about the education. As we spoke earlier, I'm living in the Netherlands. People would consider that cannabis is legal. It's far from the truth.
It's not. Yeah.
So what we have is a huge black market, no regulation on that.
Just so you know,
Yeah.
not hating on you, but we don't call it black market anymore.
Yeah, sure,
Okay.
sure.
Illicit
So
market.
from a consultancy perspective, when obviously your topic is looking at how Iceland should embrace potential legalization, what models from, say, the States that you've seen in your experience would you advise the people here to embrace in terms of the education when it comes to the young mind that is not yet developed? This is for adult use for particular use cases. So from a consultancy perspective, what would you say to the natives here that are looking to embrace the education side of it to hopefully embrace future legalization and strengthen that case?
I have about 40 things that I want to say all at once. The first thing I would say is you've got to get your medical establishment fully on board, and you do that, I think, by bringing Dr. Nathan Russo, there's Dr. June Chen, there's the Knox doctors, there's a big cadre of doctors that do continuing education for physicians, for CE credits if they need it. There are endocannabinologists that will teach the physicians about it. The thing that I think is interesting is that somewhere in the neighborhood of 85% of all Americans wake up and have access to cannabinoid therapy, whether it's CBD only in like Nebraska or full recreational cannabis. But what we don't know is what happens when you're taking, say, benzodiazepine and CBD. We do know, actually. It doubles the efficacy of the benzo, which could actually create an overdose situation. Doctors need this information, and if one of the things I would do is, as a legislator, I would require, even if you don't have legalization, I would require doctors to go get that information, because people are out there using cannabis. So if they end up in an emergency room and you're a doctor and you don't even know there's an endocannabinoid system, because most of them don't learn about it in medical school, you're putting your citizens at risk. But if you force the doctors to get the education, and then they're like, wait a minute, why am I prescribing opiates when I could be? The doctors are going to put the onus on the legislators, and that's the right order for it to go in. That's how I would do it.
Thank you so much. Guys, it's a wrap today.